Hi, everybody. It's Joe Cioffi here with everybody's favorite cat, Kovu. He's very happy today. I think they adjusted his insulin now to where he actually can handle it pretty well, and he's been doing well. He's lost a lot of weight. He's lost about half, a little more than half his body weight over the last couple of months, and now it looks like at least he stopped losing weight, and hopefully he'll start putting on a pound or two. But he's feeling good, certainly feeling up to wanting to be on camera with everybody. All right, so we've got a lot of things going on here as far as the weather pattern is concerned. And I'm doing my live stream early today, so because of the fact that I do have a library appearance at the Middle Country Library on Long Island. So if you are watching from Long Island and you've got nothing to do, 7 o'clock tonight, Middle Country in Center Reach. Exit 61 on the LIE, very easy to get to, and we'll be there from 7 to 8:30. So do join us if you can. If you can't be at this one, Sunday, I will be at the North Babylon Library in North Babylon, which is a good place to have it, and that's at 2 o'clock, and we'll talk more about that in the coming days. The weather going forward, to me, looks very interesting. There's a lot going on in the atmosphere. We continue to see the upper air pattern evolve, and that is going to eventually maybe lead to a bit of a blocking pattern. Looks also like it could be rather active and a bit on the stormy side, so we'll see how that plays out, and will probably be colder than normal with occasional little bursts of temperatures warming up a little bit in between weather systems, but nothing as far as warmth. It's not going to be anything like we were experiencing during the month of October. And we also have Tropical Storm Rina, which top winds are 60 miles an hour. That's going to be heading for the British Isles again. Another tropical system headed your way, folks. But this one is not like Ophelia. It's coming in from the west. It's not coming up from the south. Ophelia was a major hurricane before it made a transition over into a post-tropical storm. This system, and it maintained a fair amount of intensity. This one is not anything close to that. So it'll probably come through as some showers and gusty winds. But I'm thinking that if you didn't know there was a tropical system coming through, you might not be able to tell the difference between that and your standard weather system that runs through up in that part of the North Atlantic. So stand by for 1 second. We'll run the video a bit, and then we'll come back and we'll talk some more. So hang on. I want to start today with Tropical Storm Rina, which is way out in the Atlantic. It's near 40 north and about 49 west with top winds of 60 miles an hour. It's looking a little more subtropical than purely tropical, but nonetheless, the Hurricane Center maintains an identity with this. Now, it is going to be swept away to the northeast in time, and it looks like it's going to be headed for the British Isles. But I just want to point out that this system is not like Ophelia, which, if you remember, Ophelia, as a weakening major hurricane, basically came up from the south like this. Rina is going to be coming in from the west, and it is also going to be extratropical and merge with a frontal zone, and it's just not going to be the same kind of system that Ophelia was. And you can see here on the GFS by Friday morning, the identifiable surface low, which really isn't all that deep, is sitting just to the north, west-northwest of the north coast of Ireland, where it then moves across England as a weakening low and an area of rain and showers and maybe some gusty winds, but nothing that you won't be able to manage, I assure you. I don't think this is going to be any kind of serious problem with regards to the England and northwestern Europe. And in the meantime, just a quick look here. You still got a storm that's developing in the Mediterranean Sea that's going to be bringing some snows down into parts of Italy, and rain eventually down into southern Italy as the low drifts southward east of Sicily and then heading toward Greece. It's very interesting trying to, following all this. As I said, as I've said a few times, I don't really pay a lot of attention to this, and haven't over the years. There wasn't the ability to really, but now there is. And just in case for the longer term, looks like maybe around day 8 or 9, a front sweeps in from the Atlantic with some rain showers into the British Isles and eventually into Western Europe. So we will keep an eye on things. Again, I don't think this is going to be anything too serious. We're going to now focus on the weather pattern here across the United States, which is undergoing a major change. And I'm going to start with the European model today. Let me get that upper air up for you. And there we go. So we've been seeing this gradual transition that, again, I believe started with the major storm that we had back on October 29th in the east. And since then, it just seems like the atmosphere has been in some sort of turmoil / evolutionary process. Now, here's the trough that's swinging through the eastern part of the United States that's bringing in the shot of very cold air. And if you follow the jet along, it's coming down right out of north central Canada into the northeast and mid-Atlantic states. You have a separate jet that comes into the Pacific with a system coming into the northwest coast. Pay attention to what's going to be going on in the Atlantic with ridging that's building up in the Atlantic, and also we have this upper high that's sitting over the Aleutians, because gradually, as we move through time, it seems that the signature is suggesting some sort of high latitude blocking in the longer term. Now, going through the weekend, as that trough lifts out, another shortwave trough drops down into the Tennessee Valley. Models as a whole, when we deal with things in the long range, one of the things that some of the models do, the GFS is particularly guilty of this when we look beyond the 10-day period, is that it'll show something in that 10 to 16-day time frame for a day or two. Then it'll disappear. And then all of a sudden, when you get inside day 7 or 8, it suddenly reappears again. And I think this is the case with this system in the east. Remember back about 5 days or so ago, the GFS was showing some sort of storm sitting just southeast of Long Island by early next week, and then it just basically just wiped it out. Now it brings it back to some degree. But here's the European at 120 hours, and you can see that shortwave trough is evident here. You've got another strong system coming in toward the west coast, the Canadian jet just along and north of the border, but the flow is basically west to east, but you got that trough that's sitting down in the Tennessee Valley. Now what the European is doing with this is that it swings it around and then begins to drop another arm down out of Canada. It seems to be that this is plausible, not necessarily that it'll turn out this way, but I mean the idea is certainly plausible that we could have something coming down in the northern jet and having impact here on the system that comes off the mid-Atlantic coast and then runs up to the northeast from there. Let me just turn that off. And you can see that system that comes down out of Canada gets involved. And notice, by the way, at the same time, you've got an upper high that's building right up toward Greenland, and you've got a big upper high that was in the Aleutians now migrates over into the Arctic region. So there's this general process where pressures across the Arctic regions are rising, and that is going to displace the jet further south. You can see it to some degree here because the jet stream is the main jet stream is well south of its normal position, and you've got an upper low in the east. You've got an upper low sitting in the northwest part of Canada, and all along the top where you see the oranges and the purplish areas, the higher the normal pressures that are building all across the top in the polar regions and the upper layers of the atmosphere. This is a signature active and cold pattern. We are in November. Remember, we are at the beginning of November. A pattern like this a month from now would be probably very bullish for cold and snow, but we're not quite there yet. And notice, as we go into the long range, it's pretty blocky looking on the European. Upper high, sitting over Greenland. You've got the jet way to the south. You've got all these systems here. One that's between Nova Scotia and Newfoundland. You've got another one now at this point dropping into the northern plains. And then there's one that's off in the Gulf of Alaska with a ridge building up in the west. So this kind of has a look here of potential in the longer term for things to happen. I know that there's been chatter about the weekend going into the weekend before Thanksgiving is a possibility. Why don't we look at the GFS, which kind of has the same idea, although it's perhaps there's less amplitude here on the GFS with one system that the European has wound up between Nova Scotia and Newfoundland. The GFS has it a bit weaker. Here's the one that the European has strong in the northern plains. The GFS has it less so. Again, this is out at day 10. Here's the system out in the Gulf of Alaska. The ridge here is much flatter, but you still have, ridging in the Atlantic that's coming across the top, and also, ridging in the Atlantic and then ridging over Greenland, and higher pressures higher than normal that are building up from the Bering Sea into the Arctic region. So, very, very dynamic pattern, it seems to me. How it translates into the short range is going to be anybody's guess, but why don't we take a look now at what the sensible weather here is, as we like to call it. So here we'll start at today. And of course, the old cold front now is pushed down to the south. You still have some wave action on it. There's the polar front or the Arctic front is still up near the Great Lakes. Your big high is getting ready to push down with some very cold air, and you've got a strong system that's approaching the northwest coast from Northern California northward. Now, here comes the Arctic front in the east as it swings on through Thursday evening. We're going to get that big high to build in, probably going to see record low temperatures. Friday might be one of those strange days where the lows for the day for Friday may actually be achieved before midnight Friday night, and they could be record lows, and then you'll have record lows again possible Saturday morning as the high builds in. Now the GFS pulls the high out. You can see the next system for Monday. It's pretty weak until it gets offshore where a low starts to develop, and then it tries to develop it once it's southeast of Cape Cod. In the west, the system that comes into the western part of the U.S., let me just back it up. You've got the one that's coming into right now into Friday. Then you get a break. Then there's another one that comes in as we go through Tuesday into Wednesday of next week. And looks like a third one Thursday into Friday, and yet another one going into next weekend. So it looks kind of busy up in the northwest. And in the meantime, here in the east, now here's how the GFS resolves all this. We'll go back now to early next week. So the European has a slightly different look to this and a more dynamic solution with the system for early next week. So that pulls out, and then you have a weak system along about Thursday, and then here comes something that has a little more power to it for next weekend, the 18th, 19th, and low pressure that it takes up into the Ohio Valley and western New York, redevelops it off the New Jersey coast, and then intensifies it when it goes into southern New England, and this produces some snows up in New York State and interior New England, although how much cold air we'll have remains to be seen. But it does seem like the models are signaling something for that particular weekend. And then for those of you interested, if you want to go further, some sort of big cold high drops in just in time for Thanksgiving into the eastern two-thirds of the United States. Again, that could be reality. It might not be, but we'll see. Let's look at the European now. Let's go back to the European and take a look at the what it has for action here in the eastern U.S. And I'm going to get tight on this. Let me use the normal anomaly because that's a little easier to look at. And we'll start with today. And of course, we only have these in 24-hour increments. So here's the big surface high and cold air mass that builds in for Friday and Saturday. Now, with respect to the next system for early next week, the European has it further south because it has a stronger shortwave in that southern stream jet. And you have a low that develops at this point on Monday, a surface low sitting off the South Carolina coast. There's easterly winds. Here's your surface high over Nova Scotia, easterly winds bringing in moisture. And then as we head on into Tuesday, you have a low in the southern Delmarva with easterly winds from there northward into southern New England. So it has actually building pressures up in the Canadian Maritimes. And then that low goes from there out east-northeast and then up into Canada, where it intensifies into a fairly big storm when it's in southeastern Maine. Well, then I guess that's northeast. No, northeast is up in the corner. So the southeastern corner of easternmost Maine. Let's put it that way. And when we get out to day 10 on the European, here's the system that the models are signaling to perhaps do something when it reaches the East Coast, the low up in northwestern Indiana. But there's a lot here in the upper atmosphere to suggest that we're going to continue in this active period with temperatures averaging near or below average for a good chunk of the next week to 10 days. There will be some periodic blips up, but nothing that's going to take us to any extreme. All right, so let me just show you the snowfall maps. And when we get into specific storms, we're going to be able to look at this with more detail. Right now, I'm just trying to give you a broad picture. This is the GFS's picture of snowfall over the next 10 days. And the west, especially the northwest and northern Rockies, continue to chug along with heavy snows along the border there, back through the Dakotas into Minnesota, over the Great Lakes, and then you start to see sorry about that. It was near the end anyway, and my cat decided he didn't want to see any more of the video, so he started licking and pressing one of the keys on the keyboard that switched the video source. But it was right near the end anyway. She Gadget, I have to tell you, you mentioned about the fact for some reason, I've always felt that it's so cool when it snows in England. I don't know why that is. And I do, for some reason, has always felt like these, connections to British things. Again, I don't know why, but you may have hit it on the head when you said that maybe I was British in a previous existence. I don't know. For some reason, everything in England makes sense to me. I don't get it, but it just does. So I do think it's really cool when you guys get snow up in the UK. Let's see. A slogan for the fish from Taco Bell. Joe, catch the weather with Joe Cioffi and leave us fish alone. Yes. Well, I got to tell you, I don't catch many fish, so for the most part, they're fairly safe in the river. And my success rate is very low. And I do catch and release, by the way, so I don't keep them. I catch them and then take a picture and then let them go. A night, okay, I'm good with that. Some level of British royalty, I don't know. All right, so you see the pattern going forward as I illustrated with the upper air. It does look to me to be very, very interesting. And potentially for snow lovers down the road in the longer term, and I'm talking about when we get into December, it might be exciting It's when you get blocking up in the high latitudes on up into the Arctic regions, and you have the jet stream basically displaced hundreds of miles to the south. It favors cold air, and it favors snow falling further south than it otherwise would be. And again, as far as particulars, that will of course always depend on the short term, but it does look active, and also the fact that just overall with the jet stream pattern further south and energy coming in from the Pacific and moving along, that there will be opportunities for storm systems to develop. There's been a general lack of nor'easters over the last 3 or 4 years, and this might maybe what happened, not that what happened on October 29th was a nor'easter, because it wasn't, but that could maybe be a signal that the activity along the East Coast is going to be increasing this coming winter. So that's certainly going to be something that we're going to be taking a close look at. So I by the way, I did my first fire of the season in my fireplace because temperatures today where I am are in the 40s, and there's a gusty wind, so it certainly feels cold out there. So I started my first fire, and my fireplace is extremely efficient. It heats up the downstairs and most of the upstairs part of my house, but it does it too well. So I'm sitting in here in a sauna right now. It's about 76 degrees, and I want it to cool off. I may have to actually open the window. No problem, Leon. I'll see you next time, maybe Sunday in North Babylon. Mike Wood addressing a, quote, polar vortex just before Thanksgiving. Well, I wouldn't necessarily call it that. It doesn't matter what you call it. I think the best way to look at it is that we are going to be in a overall colder than average pattern and a stormier pattern. I think the models are pretty much on that course today and over the last several days or more. So we're going in that direction. Now, how it sets up specifically remains to be seen, but I think, as I described, it's pretty interesting, with the potential for some blocking developing in the northern latitudes in the North Atlantic, forcing everything to be further south, including the cold air, including the storm tracks, and so on. But lot to watch is going forward. And once again, if you're late, you're watching from the UK, you're watching from Ireland, you're watching from Wales, Scotland. Rina is a tropical storm, 60-mile-an-hour winds. It will gradually become extratropical in the next 24 to 48 hours, and it will move across Northern Ireland and across England Friday night and Saturday. But it's nothing like Ophelia, and you will, if you didn't know a tropical system was coming, I don't think you would really know the difference between this and the standard Atlantic system that comes across. So you'll be able to handle it with ease. Ophelia was a different scenario. They're coming out from different directions. They're coming from different strengths, and your outcomes are going to be totally different. There really isn't any real correlation with Atlantic hurricanes and North American winters. Not that I've ever seen. I know there have been attempts to try to see if there is a link, but I kind of seen the full gamut of the active seasons with active winters, active seasons with inactive winters. A lot depends on, you keep having a La Nina phase during hurricane season, which causes an active season. And if you get a quick transition over into some kind of El Nino, it could wind up still being a warmer than average winter in the United States, and in particularly in the eastern part of the United States. Although remember, we have to remember, folks, there's a western part of the U.S. too, and when it's warm in the east, it's cold in the west, and when it's cold in the west, it's warm in the east. So that's just the way it works. So it depends on your perspective, and depends on your geography as well. Missed the snow map when Kovu hit the button. I'm sorry, Austin. Let me see. Can I bring it up? Let me see if I can bring it up for you. Hang on. Might be able to. Just give me 1 second here. Let's see. All right. So let's pull up. I'll bring the snow map up since I got the Brady Bunch boxes going. Okay. There really isn't too much on it, to tell you the truth. It's pretty quiet, really. Here we go. So here's a snowfall map in the eastern part of the United States. It's still loading here over the next 10 days. And oh, I got the wrong one. That's a 24-hour snowfall. So here's the total snowfall. So I'll just back it up to the beginning. So we're starting at real time today, roughly. And we'll take it out 10 days. And you can see now there's the snow that you see in northern New England and upstate New York that just pops up. That's with the polar front or the Arctic front that moves through Thursday. And then really not too much in this time frame as we go through this period. Most of the activity is really either along the Great Lakes or up in southern Canada. So for the east, at least, this is pretty quiet. We go to the west, and I'll start this from the beginning. This is where everything's a bit busier, or more busy. I'm not sure which one's right. A little brain fade. But here we go with the west, and you can see in the west, the snowfall in some areas in the northern Rockies is substantial over the next 10 days. So these change from day to day. I would not look at these with any kind of in a specific nature, because beyond the first day or two, the variations on these snowfall maps pretty wide. I don't know, how these maps, when they're developed, just how they figure out, the snow. I mean, I know they use a 10-to-1 ratio, but there are other factors involved, and I'm not sure exactly how this works. Well, you're in Grand Rapids, so you're probably on the southern end of a lot of that snow that it shows around the Great Lakes. So you might get some, but I don't think it's going to be anything that to shout home about. Kevin Francis says the ski trails in Vermont in the elevations have snow cover on them. Awesome. Well, with the pattern over the next couple of weeks the way it is, you're probably going to do fairly well up your way. All right, folks, I think I'm going to call it a day. I got that library chat tonight, 7 o'clock, Middle Country Library in Center Reach, New York. Again, 7 o'clock. That's exit 61 on the LIE. Just drive up 2 miles to Middle Country Road, make a right, and then go to Eastwood Boulevard, which is basically 200 feet from after you make the right. You make a left and drive down a couple of blocks, and the library is right there. Sunday, I'll be at the North Babylon Library at 2 o'clock. Also on Long Island. For those of you who can't make it tonight, you can maybe make it on Sunday. And I've got a few others that I've booked along the way. So I'll be letting you know all about that. You got the Joe Stradamus store in case you want to do a little Christmas shopping. I put the link up on the chat. You can take a look at some of the fun stuff that's available. And don't forget to check all the latest goings on weather-wise on my website, meteorologistjoecioffi.com, and my buddy Angry Ben is on nycweathernow.com. And let's see, I think Kova wants to say goodbye. Do you want to say goodbye? There you go. You want to say goodbye? Say goodbye. And stop trying to direct my show by hitting the keys on my keyboard, okay? Attaboy. All right, folks, have a great day. We'll see you tomorrow.